Imagine this. The car sitting in your driveway, the one you've trusted for years, could be quietly headed for the scrapyard of history, and no one told you. Behind the scenes, once popular car brands are falling apart, losing value, closing dealerships, and leaving loyal drivers stuck with vehicles no one wants to touch. In this video, we're pulling back the curtain on 10 automakers that are on the edge of collapse. Some are fading fast, others still look strong, but that confidence is built on thin ice. Stick around, especially for the final few. One of them might just be a name you still believe is safe, but that belief could cost you. Lincoln. Lincoln used to be a name that meant something. Presidential limos, town cars cruising city streets, a true symbol of American luxury. But today, Lincoln is barely hanging on, and most people don't even notice. In 2024, Lincoln's US sales dropped to just under 88,000 vehicles. That's a 27% decline from the year before, and the lowest point in over a decade. The sedan lineup, completely gone. The Continental and MKZ were axed years ago. And now, even its SUVs, like the Nautilus and Corsair, are struggling to stand out in a sea of better-selling, better-equipped rivals. Ford is pouring billions into EVs and trucks, but Lincoln? It's not even on the front burner. Promised electric models have faced delays and vague timelines. The much-hyped Star concept? Still just that, a concept. And while Cadillac is charging ahead with the Lyriq and Celestiq, Lincoln's electric future is missing in action. The real danger is that Lincoln has lost its identity. It's no longer bold, no longer innovative, and no longer a top priority for its parent company. In fact, Ford quietly shifted production of the Lincoln Nautilus out of the US entirely, moving it to China, a massive red flag that shows where the brand's future really lies. There's also been a sharp decline in dealer presence. Fewer showrooms, fewer service centers, that means longer waits, less support, and bigger headaches for owners. And resale value? It's sinking fast. Most Lincoln models are near the bottom of the luxury segment for retained value. A brutal hit if you plan to trade in. So while Lincoln technically still exists, the writing's on the wall. No flagship car, no real EV rollout, no buzz, and no clear path forward. If you're thinking about buying a Lincoln, just ask yourself, do you really want to own a brand that its own parent company has quietly left behind? Nissan. Remember when Nissan used to be a name you could count on? From the iconic GTR to the sporty 240Z and the rock-solid Maxima, this brand once ruled the streets. But today, it's a completely different story. Nissan is in serious trouble. In 2024, they still managed to sell over 875,000 vehicles in the US. Sounds decent, right? But dig a little deeper and it gets ugly fast. The Maxima? Sales have cratered by over 90%. The Altima's fading fast, too. Models that once dominated are now barely hanging on. Behind the scenes, it's worse. The company is staring down a $5.4 billion loss, and that's just the beginning. A highly anticipated merger with Honda fell apart in 2024. It could have created the world's third largest automaker. Instead, it collapsed when Honda refused to give up control. Now, Nissan's scrambling. They're cutting 9,000 jobs. They've shut down plants. 2 electric cars planned for the US were scrapped. No hybrids, no plug-ins, no real roadmap, just panic and patchwork. And let's not forget the scandals. The one that kicked it all off. Former CEO Carlos Ghosn getting arrested in Japan for hiding millions in income and using company cash like his personal bank account. He literally escaped the country in a shipping crate. That was back in 2018. And Nissan's been spiraling ever since. Multiple CEOs have come and gone. No clear vision. And according to leaked internal reports, insiders say Nissan might only have 12 to 15 months left, unless a miracle deal shows up fast. If you're eyeing a Nissan right now, think carefully. This might not just be a car with issues, it could be a company on its last lap. Chrysler. Chrysler isn't just fading, it's collapsing in real time. Back in 2005, Chrysler sold over 500,000 vehicles in the US. Fast forward to 2024, and that number has crashed below 145,000. That's not a dip, That's a nosedive. And what's left? Basically one car, the Pacifica minivan. The cheaper Voyager, only available to fleet buyers. The iconic 300 sedan, discontinued in 2023. And even the Pacifica, Chrysler's last real product, saw a 17% drop in sales just this past year. Their big hope was the all-electric Airflow SUV, a sleek concept meant to kickstart Chrysler's EV future. But in mid-2024, Stellantis pulled the plug, blaming high development costs, outdated design, and a shrinking EV market. Now Stellantis, Chrysler's parent company, is doing something even more ominous, reviewing all 14 of its brands. The goal? Cut the dead weight, and Chrysler is right near the top of the chopping block. It's not just about weak sales. In 2025, a Chrysler dealership in Maine defaulted on a $5.7 million loan. Another in Georgia shut down after a fraud scandal left customers without trade-in titles or cash. That's how bad things are getting. Yes, they're trying to bounce back with a refreshed Pacifica and a new midsize SUV slated for 2026, but that might be too little, too late. Without a breakout hit or a brand-defining move, Chrysler could simply vanish from US roads, and soon. If you're thinking about buying one, consider this. When a brand is circling the drain, resale values tank, parts dry up, and service becomes a nightmare. This isn't just a bad time to buy a Chrysler, it might be your last. Buick. Buick might still technically be around, but in the US, it's a ghost of what it used to be. In 2024, Buick's US sales barely crossed 130,000 units, a staggering decline from its heyday when it was one of the best-selling brands in the country. Most Americans today can't even name a single Buick model, and that's a problem. A brand without recognition is a brand on borrowed time. The once iconic sedans like the Regal, LaCrosse, and Lucerne, all discontinued. What's left is a shrinking lineup of look-alike SUVs, the Encore, Envision, and Envista, that are easy to miss and hard to differentiate from cheaper Chevrolet or GMC counterparts. Buick no longer stands for anything unique. It's not luxury, it's not value, it's just there. And while General Motors claims they're redefining Buick for the future, there's little proof to back it up. Their EV plans are vague at best. The Wildcat EV concept grabbed headlines, but there's no production timeline, no solid specs, and no commitment to bring it to US streets. Meanwhile, Cadillac is getting billions in EV investment and media buzz. Buick? Crickets. The real twist? Buick is thriving in China, where it's a status symbol. In fact, the Chinese market makes up over 80% of Buick's global sales, which means GM is far more likely to cut Buick loose in the US than sink more money into keeping it alive here. Signs of that slow fade are already showing. Dealer numbers are shrinking, advertising has disappeared, and Buick's brand image is stuck in limbo. Too dull for younger buyers, too unfamiliar for older ones. That's a death sentence in today's car market. For buyers, this spells real risk. If Buick gets pulled from the US, expect resale value to crash, service support to shrink, and parts availability to suffer, especially for lower volume models. Pontiac. Pontiac wasn't just a car brand, it was a full-blown American icon. Back in 1968, Pontiac was riding high, selling over 800,000 vehicles in a single year. It gave us legends like the GTO, the Firebird Trans Am, and that weird little Aztec that somehow became a cult classic. But by 2009, that momentum had completely collapsed. Sales had plummeted to under 180,000 units, and the brand was on life support. Then came the 2008 financial crisis. General Motors was hemorrhaging cash and needed a massive $53 billion government bailout. As part of the restructuring, GM had to make a choice, and Pontiac was one of the first brands to get the axe. The last Pontiac, a white G6 sedan, rolled off the line in January 2010. Just like that, one of America's most recognizable car brands was gone. The aftermath wasn't pretty. Dealerships shut down across the country. Owners were stuck with cars that depreciated rapidly. Parts became harder to find, and resale values tanked. Some models, like the Solstice or older Firebirds, gained value among collectors. But for everyday drivers, Pontiac quickly became a liability. Sure, some enthusiasts still chase down rare GTOs or turbo Grand Prix, but if you're thinking about buying a used Pontiac now, you better love risk. Maintenance is unpredictable, insurance can be a pain, and future support is almost non-existent. Pontiac's legacy is untouchable, but in today's world, it's a dead brand driving, and the longer you hang on to one, the more it could cost you. Genesis. Genesis came out of the gate like a luxury underdog with something to prove. Bold design, plush interiors, cutting-edge tech, all at a price that undercut BMW, Lexus, and Mercedes. And for a few years, it looked like it could actually disrupt the luxury market. But now, Genesis is running out of steam. Fast. US sales flatlined in 2024, hovering just above 69,000 units. That's a 15% drop from the year before, and a dangerous sign for a brand still trying to prove itself. What was once the next big thing in luxury is now struggling to stay relevant in a segment that demands constant innovation. Let's talk lineup. The G70, once praised for its athleticism and value, now lags behind newer competitors in performance, tech, and resale. The G90, Genesis' flagship sedan, looks great on paper, but in reality, it's barely a blip on the radar for serious luxury buyers. And with sedans fading fast in the US, Genesis is stuck trying to sell a dream fewer people are buying into. Even their SUVs, the GV70 and GV80, haven't hit the sales numbers Hyundai hoped for. Reviews have cooled, reliability concerns are popping up, and software glitches have been reported in multiple owner forums. Meanwhile, Genesis's fully electric GV60. Underwhelming range, niche appeal, and way too expensive for a brand that hasn't earned long-term trust. And here's the bigger issue. Genesis has no standalone dealership network. Most models are still sold through Hyundai dealers, making the luxury experience feel not so luxurious. While there are promises of dedicated showrooms, the rollout has been painfully slow, and in some regions, non-existent. That kills prestige, destroys buyer confidence, and makes post-sale support hit or miss. Behind the scenes, even Hyundai is shifting focus. Billions are being funneled into Kia and Ioniq-branded EVs. Genesis? It's barely getting a mention in Hyundai's future-facing strategies. If the brand doesn't deliver a breakout hit soon, it risks becoming another failed luxury experiment, like Saab, Oldsmobile, or even Pontiac. That means ownership headaches, falling resale values, shrinking service access, and a nameplate that may quietly disappear in the next few years. Infiniti. Infiniti was once seen as a sleek modern rival to BMW and Lexus, a bold luxury brand with a fresh attitude. But fast forward to 2024, and Infiniti is sliding straight toward irrelevance. Last year, US sales dropped to just 57,890 units, down 13%, and continuing a trend that's been heading in the wrong direction for over a decade. At this rate, it's not just a slump, it's a slow-motion exit. The clearest sign of trouble? Infiniti no longer has its own identity. More and more dealerships are consolidating with Nissan, putting both brands under the same roof. That move saves costs, sure, but it also screams decline. When a luxury brand loses its own showroom experience, that tells you everything about where it's headed. And the product lineup? Shrinking fast. Infiniti is pulling the plug on both the QX50 and QX55 by the end of 2025. Trade tariffs have disrupted production from Mexico, and with fewer models in the pipeline, it's clear that the company is retreating instead of expanding. What's coming next? Two new SUVs, the QX60 and QX65, but they're priced for high-income buyers only. There's no strategy for affordability, no entry-level options, and no effort to recapture mainstream appeal. Add to that a history of inflated performance claims, repeated recalls for issues like faulty airbags and power steering, and a brand reputation that's been quietly deteriorating for years. And it's no wonder Infiniti is fading. Nissan, the parent company, says it's backing Infiniti, but their strategy is clear. Chase higher profit margins, not more buyers. That might help the books in the short term, but for everyday drivers, it's a risk. Infiniti is no longer a bold alternative. It's a shrinking shadow of what it once was. And unless something major changes, owning one could feel more like being stuck with a legacy problem than driving a luxury car. Suzuki. Suzuki didn't crash and burn in the US. It just quietly slipped out the back door. In 2012, Suzuki officially exited the US car market. No big announcement, no farewell tour. They simply couldn't keep up with tightening safety and emissions regulations and their cars. Let's be honest, they just didn't excite anyone. While competitors were stepping up with bolder designs and better tech, Suzuki kept pushing out bland, underpowered models that faded into the background. No standout styling, no innovation, and no reason for buyers to stay loyal. And it didn't stop there. Even after pulling out of the US, Suzuki's reputation took more hits overseas. In 2016, the brand admitted to using improper testing methods on fuel economy and emissions across 16 models. Over 2 million vehicles were affected. It was a massive scandal, and the backlash was global. Then came more trouble. German officials launched a probe into Suzuki's diesel models for using possible defeat devices to cheat emissions tests, the same kind that wrecked Volkswagen's credibility. Engines supplied by Stellantis were also part of the investigation. The fallout is still ongoing, and Suzuki continues to face legal scrutiny in multiple countries. Today, Suzuki still sells motorcycles, ATVs, and boats in the US, but the car badge is dead, and for good reason. If you come across a used Suzuki for sale, know this: support is limited, parts are harder to find, and that nameplate carries baggage that hasn't been cleaned up. It may look like a cheap deal, but in the long run, it's a car brand best left in the past. Jaguar. Jaguar has always stood for sleek sedans, roaring engines, and British luxury with attitude. But in 2024, the brand hit the brakes hard. Almost every model in Jaguar's lineup was discontinued. The XE, XF, F-Type, E-Pace, and even the I-Pace, all gone. Only the F-Pace remains, and that too is running on borrowed time. Why? Because Jaguar is attempting a complete pivot, going fully electric. Sounds bold, right? But here's the problem. The plan is shaky, the timing is risky, and the rollout is already turning people away. The brand's big move is a new electric 4-door GT with a $125,000 plus price tag. That's their first swing at redefining Jaguar's future, with 2 more EVs planned by 2026. But here's the kicker: Jaguar has no EV reputation, no mass market success, and no clear identity in the electric space. And asking buyers to pay 6 figures to be a guinea pig? That's a gamble most won't take. Making things worse, Jaguar's rebrand flopped hard. The famous Leaper logo was replaced with a generic J inside a circle. Their new slogan, Live Vivid, came with flashy ads, fashion models, and vague buzzwords like exuberance and breaking molds. The internet dragged it instantly. Loyal fans called it tone-deaf, confusing, and completely disconnected from the cars themselves. Meanwhile, Jaguar is slashing dealerships across the US, cutting their footprint to match shrinking sales. That means fewer service centers, weaker support, and a lot more frustration for current owners. And let's not forget Jaguar's long history of recalls, quality control issues, and software bugs. Owning one was always a bit of a risk, and now, during a full-blown identity crisis, that risk is multiplied. This isn't just a transition, it's a total reset, and it could either save the brand or bury it for good. Either way, buyers should think twice before placing a bet on a company that doesn't seem to know who it is anymore. Lucid Motors. Lucid burst onto the scene with big promises. Ultra-luxury EVs, 500-plus miles of range, tech to rival Tesla, and a design that looked like the future. But just a few years later, the dream is unraveling fast. Their flagship model, the Lucid Air, claimed up to 520 miles of range, more than any Tesla on the market. It launched with sleek marketing, premium pricing, and sky-high expectations. But behind the scenes, it was all smoke and mirrors. In 2024, Lucid posted a staggering $3.4 billion loss, and their stock price has plummeted more than 95% since its peak. Investors are bailing, and confidence in the brand is drying up fast. Why? The problems are everywhere. Lucid couldn't meet production targets, struggling to source even basic parts like windshields and carpeting. Vehicles were delayed. Customers waited months or longer for delivery. And when the cars did arrive, new issues surfaced. Software bugs, infotainment glitches, and a glitchy driver assist system called Dream Drive that many buyers say felt half-baked. Then, the leadership shakeup hit. CEO Peter Rawlinson, once touted as the visionary behind Tesla's Model S, stepped down. An interim CEO was brought in to stabilize the company, a red flag if there ever was one. Even worse, Lucid's survival now hinges on foreign funding, specifically from Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, which owns the majority of the company. Without that money, Lucid likely wouldn't have made it through 2023, and that level of dependency raises major concerns about long-term stability and control. And now, the lawsuits are stacking up. Investors are accusing Lucid's leadership of misleading them about production capacity, inflating expectations to secure more cash, and downplaying internal struggles. If the courts agree, the fallout could be devastating. The bottom line, Lucid aimed to be the American electric luxury leader, but so far it's delivered a massive burn rate, angry customers, legal trouble, and a fading future. If things don't change, and fast, Lucid may join the long list of EV startups that came in loud and disappeared quietly. That wraps up the 10 car brands that are teetering on the edge of extinction. Some are already on life support. Others are clinging to their last chance. But the warning signs are clear. If you're driving one of these, the value could vanish, support could disappear, and you might be left holding the bag. So before you make your next move, think twice. If this saved you from a bad decision, go ahead and hit like, share it with someone car shopping, and subscribe, because we're just getting started.